Hello, and you're all very welcome along to another episode of the Gaelic Statsman podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Hurley. I'm joined tonight by Seamus Brady from Clare and Liam White from the Limerick Voice to discuss this weekend's hurling and football action. It's a big show this weekend, or a big show this evening, in fact, and a big weekend of action, obviously, between football provincial semi-finals, the Munster Hurling Championship and the Leinster Hurling Championship begin this weekend, along with the Joe McDonagh Cup as well. So a lot of action to get stuck into. I'm looking forward to discussing with the lads this evening. First of all, Seamus, you're at the top of the screen, so I'll go to you first on the weekend coming up. Interesting weekend, including a few football semi-finals and the opening weekend of the hurling championship.
Yeah, Matthew, very, very excited for another episode. You could title this episode Matthew and the Two Gingers Go Into the Weekend's Action.
Am I allowed to
Looking
swear
forward
on
to jumping in, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the first time we're like, say hi to the elephant in the room. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to jumping in. Mad that we keep saying that, mad that the hurling championship's already on our doorstep. Cork and Clare round one. It's gonna be unbelievable, man. I can't wait to jump in.
Exactly so, and I'll go to the fella at the bottom of the screen there, Liam White. How are things with yourself? Offaly are playing Dublin this weekend as well, so we might have a bit of a battle on in this podcast here.
We've had one already, so we 2 months ago. So we have another one now. In a way, thankfully, we don't have another one with the football next weekend. That one might have been a bit more ugly from our perspective, but no, delighted to be back on, and looking forward to this one. The Two Gingers, that's a title for you. I should have thought of that, but yeah, no, it's hopefully the Two Gingers will come out with some bit of knowledge for you, and people will enjoy it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Exactly so, and Gavin O'Reilly is coming in with a comment here to start the show off. How are you lads? Like the football championship is properly starting this weekend, and of course it is, Gavin. But ironic, isn't it? Because we're going to start with the hurling rather than the football this weekend. And as Seamus mentioned there, Clare against Cork is going to be absolutely mouth-watering. And that is the game we are starting with this week in this podcast. On in Zimmer Biomet Park Kissogue on Sunday at 2 p.m. live on RT2. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, that new name. It just for the context for everybody, it used to be Cusack Park, but it's now that name. But in terms of this game, Seamus, it's a repeat of the All-Ireland final, obviously. Cork scored 6 goals against Clare in the league. I'd be safe to say Cork won't score 6 goals in this game, but all the more, this is going to be a very, very interesting encounter to look at.
Certainly, and I'm not even going to try have a go at that name pronunciation. That is an absolute mouthful and a half. Yeah, I mean, this game sells itself. Like, I've been listening around to various different podcasts and stuff like that that have been previewing this game, and it's just, you couldn't get a better opening fixture, could you? Like, I mean, the rematch for last year's All Ireland hurling final. Me and you were there, Matthew, sitting in the front row and the Hogan stand. It was probably one of the best live sporting events I've ever been at. Not probably, definitely one of the live sporting events I've ever been at. The atmosphere, the quality on show from both sides, the fact that down to the final second, you couldn't call what way it was going to go, and there was a hair's breadth between both of the teams. Since then, there's been more added to it. Horgan still looks at the top of his game. Horgan still looks like he's determined to get that All Ireland medal. Shane O'Donnell's injury and the updates on his fitness, and it looks like he won't play a part in this game. If he does, he certainly won't be at in tip top form. And then obviously the 6-goal annihilation that Cork put on Clare in the league campaign means that the stakes feel even higher. Like, the rivalry between Cork and Clare, I think he could argue it's never been this intense between Cork and Clare, because Cork felt like they were on a crest of a wave last year towards an All Ireland title, and when Rob Downey scored the goal, I remember like really having this feeling that, like, God, they are going to do it, aren't they? Like, they're going to win the All Ireland. And Clare were the ones that they said not so fast, and they halted it. And so for Cork to get Clare in round one is a golden opportunity to lay down a marker for the Munster and All Ireland championships. And having seen their form in the league, I think everything points to a Cork winning this one.
We'd have to see this weekend. Obviously, Brian O'Riordan with a comment in here. Clare Cork is going to be an absolute belter. Clare will be very eager to gain revenge after conceding 6 goals in the league. And I'll throw this one to you, Liam, about the 6 goals in the league. And Seamus said himself and I was at the All Ireland final last year. I think you were at the All Ireland final as well. So all 3 of us were there last year, and it was just an incredible game of hurling. No doubt about it. But the 6 goals that Clare conceded in the league, would they be concerned about that, do you think, moving into this game?
I think you'd have to be, considering the way they conceded the goals. I wouldn't even think the tally is bad, but the way they conceded the goals were atrocious. They were just allowed like Shane Barrett and Brian Hayes, and they were all just allowed to walk past the Clare defence. They cannot allow the same thing to happen this weekend. Look, I like Adam Hogan and Conor Lean, but they're going to have to be a lot tighter this weekend. They're going to have to be a lot more physical, and I think they will be, especially when it's championship in comparison to the league, and especially when you look at the record that Cork have over the last couple of years down in. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I'm just going to call it Ennis. But yeah, I think the record that they have down there over the last number of years, and even the record that Cork have against Clare in general, like I believe Clare's won the last 4 championship games, so I feel like if you were to judge it by the media, it would feel like Cork have this game won already, but Clare will simply tell you they don't. Now, I do think Cork will win this weekend. I think they will finally burst that bubble. I just see a hunger in them that I've not seen in years, and especially after the way they lost the All-Ireland final last year as well. Like you said, it was the best game I've ever been to from a neutral point of view. It was just simply it was really, really enjoyable. You just couldn't. I'm kind of the same as Seamus. When Downey scored that goal, I had a feeling it was actually going to be a rout. I was nearly petrified it was going to be like Kilkenny Waterford in 2008. But thankfully, well, obviously not from your perspective, Matthew, but thankfully, from a neutral point of view, it wasn't. We got a cracking game. But I just think Cork, you saw them in the league. You saw how hungry they were. You saw how much it meant to win against Tipperary in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I just feel like Cork at the moment, especially with the game they're playing at the moment, the running game, the speed that they have, Tim O'Mahony in midfield. I mean, sure, it's like putting Devin Toner in there. He's just absolutely humongous. And I mean, Darragh Fitzgibbon's one of my favorite hurlers. He's someone who I think will be hurler of the year if all goes well for Cork. So I think he's going to be crucial. And I mean, you've players there like Seamus Harnedy who might not even start, or Diarmuid Healy who I think should be given a start. He might not even be in the starting 15. It'll be announced later. So I think Cork will come through. I think Clare will find it difficult, especially with, like you said, the way they conceded the 6 goals in the league. Now Brian Lohan would have had a good hard look at that over the last few weeks and would have seen Cork in the final against Tipperary. So he'll have to try and figure out a way in order to stop them. But I think it's going to be a long, long afternoon for Clare. Not a long afternoon, but I think in terms of just dominance from Cork, I can absolutely see it happening.
Absolutely. It's going to be a long afternoon for all of us watching the game, no doubt about it. Brian, with another comment in here, I'd have to say Cork, Hayes, Hoggy and Connolly look really good. I'm very impressed with Cork's hunger and desire this season. He was also saying earlier on, we had one of the greatest All-Ireland finals. Hurling final day is a very special occasion. And Brian, with another comment in here, as a Cork man, what be expecting. So yeah, some very interesting comments there from Brian there. Interesting enough then, Seamus, I did, on the Southern Star podcast last week, I did have the pleasure of interviewing Shane Kingston last week, and I asked him about kind of the fan build-up and kind of the fans getting behind the team, and how do you deal with the hype in a way? And he said, we're trying to block out the noise. It's irrelevant to us. We're just going to focus on what's going on in the field. We know we have a very bad record against Clare in the championship, as Liam mentioned there, throughout the last few seasons. We're going to focus on that. That's the number one priority in the next few weeks. That has to be the general aim. I know Shane Kingston was saying that's one player from the Cork team, but surely he's speaking for behalf of the whole team in regards to Cork, really blocking out that noise. And if Cork managed to do that, there could be serious. There could be a serious season on for them.
Oh, they're definitely, like, they have the capabilities to win the All-Ireland. There's no doubt about it. Like, they have the players, they have the talent, they have the balance, and the squad is all good. Like, they would have been worthy All-Ireland champions last season. It was a grain of rice that separated them and Clare. And I keep going back. That shot from Robbie O'Flynn goes past Ava Quilligan in the dying minutes of extra time. That hits the back of the net. Cork would have got over the line and won the All-Ireland. So, like, they had what it took last year to get there, and they would have been worthy All-Ireland champions. So they know that they're good enough. They just need to make sure that they don't get carried away with the hype. And we've seen examples in the past. I think from my own personal standpoint with Dublin, you look at the 2000s, especially under Paul Caffrey, the hype used to always carry us away. We used to always, act like we were there or thereabouts. You remember Kerry in 2009? All the hype that Dublin were going to destroy Kerry, and when Kerry got the good start, it fell apart. Whereas then you look at Donegal 2012 under Jim McGuinness. That was an example of when there was a hype machine around that Donegal team. Jim McGuinness gave a masterclass that year in terms of managing the hype and managing the fan build up around his team, because he just kept them insulated, kept their heads focused and focused on the task at hand, and they got over the line. Pat Gilroy, 2011, did the exact same thing with Dublin, arrested the hype, brought it back down to a more bearable level, and Dublin were able to focus on the task at hand and get the job done. For Cork, managing the fans' expectations and managing the hype will be an important factor of their year. Look, they want the fans to travel with them. They want the fans behind them, but they don't want that pressure that they're expected to win in every single game, because then, once you make mistakes, it can feel monumental, versus if the expectations were somewhat managed. But in all seriousness, you want the fans to travel the way that they did last year. You want them to travel to Semple Stadium the way that they didn't pack it out in a completely red stadium in the middle of Thurles in the middle of summer. It was unbelievable from a Cork fan's perspective. So, yeah, they really, really have what it takes. Managing out those expectations is going to be crucial. And the really interesting thing, you phrased it in your question to Liam there, why this game is going to be so interesting, because both of these teams are coming into this with a sense of needing to get revenge on the other. Even though Cork did beat Clare and bet them out the gate in the league, I've no doubt Pat Ryan is going to be like, lads, that's the league. Clare weren't at their best. This is Clare at their best. This is going to be their 15 best players that they have available to them on the pitch. And Cork will still feel like they owe Clare one in the championship. Whereas Clare were so humiliated by that defeat in the league, the 6 goals that they conceded, that they will feel like they owe Cork one as well. And that's why this game has even added layers to it. It's 2 superb teams that have been unbelievable over the last few years. They played out one of the greatest All-Ireland finals I've ever seen last year. And the individual rivalries between some of the players is unbelievable. On top of that, it's an absolute cracker to launch the championship. And I just think Cork, they've learned too much from last year when they were flat coming out with a game against Waterford and they got stung. I think they're not going to let that happen again this year. I think they know that they were good enough last year to win that All-Ireland. And there seems to be a really strong momentum behind them. It reminds me a lot of like Tipperary 2010 when they fell heartbreakingly short in that final in 2009. And then they just had a really special, unique energy behind them in 2010. Cork are given that vibe right now. You try not to get carried away, but it does feel like they are one of, if not the outright front runners for the All-Ireland, and they can definitely do it this year. And I think they're going to look to lay down a serious statement this weekend by beating Clare in the championship, who, as Liam said, have had a very good record against Cork in championship. I've never feared them. They won the last 4 games against them in championship. They won't back down, but I think Cork have enough to get over the line this time.
Yeah, you would imagine so. Brian in with another comment here. Jim Gavin was brilliant at damping any hype and backing outside noise. And I would definitely agree with that.
To
Brian,
the point where it became boring. To the point where it became boring. Like, if you did an interview with a Dublin player under Jim Gavin, you could predict all his answers. You could ask him about anything and he'd just say, look, it's a pleasure to represent the Dubs and it's a pleasure to wear the jersey. It's an honour. And like that, they're pre-prepared answers, but it did a great job at, quelling the hype a little bit.
It definitely did. And I think we're all back in Cork to win this game. But in terms of Clare coming into this game, Liam, do you think, could we see a few hits maybe in the first, I'd say, 10, 20 minutes for the likes of Adam Hogan? Let's say Adam Hogan's on Patrick Organ, like he was in the league. Are we going to see a lot of hits from these Clare players to prove a point in a way? Because they tried to do it in the league when the stakes weren't as high, really, as this game, arguably, well, not arguably, definitely. Do you think the likes of Adam Hogan will batter into these Cork players and try to make sure that they know you're an Ennis now, lads?
I'm sure they'd love to, but I'm sure they'd absolutely love to. But I suppose the one problem that they would have is just with, and even Brian Gavin wrote about it earlier in the Irish Examiner. It's going to be a very difficult summer for referees, given how difficult they found the league. I mean, sure, some like you look at the biggest examples from the league, the Kilkenny Tip game where there was 4 red cards in the space of 20 minutes. Kilkenny got 3. Arguably for me, 2 of them were not red cards, and Tips one was, I think it was a Tips one, I think was fairly harsh as well, or I can't remember which one was harsh, but there were certainly more harsh ones than realistic ones. The James Mahon one, which I won't go into again, but because I might get you cancelled. But again, it was a very difficult summer. So I suppose they'd want to be careful of how they do sort of throw themselves at Cork in a way. But at the same time, yeah, you do make a great point. They'll have to be a lot more, I suppose, not play dirty, but play physical in the right way. Like I can recall Clare playing in the minor final against Galway in 23, just before we played Cork in the under-20 All-Ireland final. And Clare played beautiful hurling, but they were physical, but in the right way. They were physical in winning the ball back and beating their man and stopping their man from, gaining possession, gaining any yards, pushing them back a couple of yards. And it was brilliant to watch, So if they can imply some of that style into this weekend, then it can cause Cork a lot of problems, especially if Pat Ryan decides to go with Brian Hayes, which I wouldn't do, to be honest with you. I thought he looked a bit uncomfortable against Tipperary, albeit he still had an okay game. I'd just be thinking, look, you have a long season ahead potentially. Why risk it in the first game? You've plenty of other players on the bench as well. But at the same time, I think Clare need to try and come out with a bit of a statement, especially after the league campaign, getting relegated. It's, as All-Ireland champions, I know the league is the league, but at the end of the day, you don't want to be getting relegated after winning an All-Ireland title. It's almost like setting a bad example, not a bad example, but it doesn't look good on your behalf, and it'll be interesting to see if the hunger is still there from last year. We saw how much Clare kind of fell backwards after winning in 13, losing out to Wexford in 14, to Cork in 15, and kind of they won the league in 16, but they couldn't get back to the real high levels, in my opinion, really until 2018, when they'll count themselves unlucky to have lost to that Galway team that won the All-Ireland the year before. So the hunger will be interesting to see. I just don't think they'll have enough to stop this Cork machine at the weekend, to be honest with you. Even with, you still have your Tony Kellys in there. Shane O'Donnell missing is absolutely crucial. And for me, I think he's a big reason why I think Clare will actually knock it out of Munster, to be honest with you. I think they'll actually finish 4th in Munster. I know you've got a smile on your face that I've said that, but but as I said on Aaron's podcast, I have family members from Clare, so I've nothing against them at all. But I just think Tipperary might just pip them to 3rd spot this year. And in terms of Cork and Limerick, I mean, they're the 2 best sides in Ireland at the moment, so there's no point disputing that one.
Yeah.
Long story short, I think Cork will beat Clare this weekend. Bit of a bold prediction, actually. Waterford are playing Clare later on in the Munster Championship in Walsh Park. I think Waterford could actually beat Clare.
Yeah.
But Waterford are being written off left, right, and centre. And me personally, like it's still ironic that I'm saying that, because I do think that they will finish 5th. But I mean, people aren't even considering them as being capable of causing upsets and stuff. Like last year, they came very close to getting out of the Munster Championship. They nearly completely derailed Cork at the start with that defeat that they dished out to them. And then the game against Clare is, you play that game again, Waterford might come out the right side of it. I mean, they were so unlucky that day, and Davy Fitz nearly lost all his hair, on the sideline that day. There was so many controversial moments in that game. But I really, really do believe you. Like, you look at another factor that needs to be considered from this game is, in the Munster Championship, like, whoever loses the opening game feels like they're extremely on the back foot straight away, because then you know that one more defeat and you're hovering out. You're hovering. You know that one more defeat in the Munster Championship, if you lose your opener, you know that you're hovering near the exit. And Cork were pushed to the brink last year. I don't think they're going to want to put themselves there again. I think Pat Ryan will be like, lads, let's do it straightforward this time. But they've got a massive test, because Clare in the past have not been the slightest bit concerned about the hype that has surrounded Cork. They weren't the slightest bit concerned last year when Cork beat Limerick in the final, and it felt like they were on the crest of a wave, carrying them to that All Ireland. It was Clare that stood firm and checked that momentum and denied them on the day. So if there's anybody who won't be affected by the Cork hype, it's Clare. And you can make your case for Limerick and stuff like that as well. But Clare are probably the team that Cork have had a bit of a bogey about in the championship, and this is a brilliant chance for Cork to bury that and to send out a real statement. And I don't think they're going to let it pass them by. I think Cork win by 4.
Yeah, and we're all predicting Cork win, as I said as well. But we're mentioning John Fogarty's kind of combined league table of the round robin series. I've seen it on X in recent days. Clare actually were top of that, but they haven't won a Munster title, which is absolutely mad. And as well as that, I was actually looking at score difference between Clare, Limerick, and Cork in those combined games. Limerick was plus 73, I think it was. Cork was between plus 40 and plus 50. Clare, despite being top of the league, were actually plus 24. That kind of epitomises to me, Clare know how to win tight games. Just the last point in this game, could that be a positive for, I'll throw this one to you, Liam, could that be a positive for Clare?
I suppose it could be, but then, as you say, they haven't won a Munster title in that time either, and that's the thing that's going to, hurt them the most. Like, especially even when you listen to Gerlach Nan kind of saying, well, in just the words I'm going to say here, winning an All Ireland is great, but you need to win a Munster title. It's sort of the opposite with Cork. It's like, okay, you won the Munster title, but you need to win the All Ireland title. So I think it's in a way it can derail them in a way, but they still have put up massive score lines over the years. I mean, they put up against G last, was it 326 in the round robin? They've put up 124s against Limericks, and they put 421 past Waterford. So they put up big score lines, but kind of like you said, they've also been they can be leaky at the back when they want to be as well. I mean, they essentially threw that game kind of similar to how Waterford sort of nearly derailed Cork season last year. Clare had Limerick bet, and then in the space of a couple of minutes, Limerick got some, let's just say, fortunate goals, to be honest with you, and it completely turned the game on its head. And they still conceded 3 goals to Cork the next game. Conceded 2 to Kilkenny, and realistically, Kilkenny will still be kicking themselves that they didn't win that All Ireland semi-final. Really, if anything, they'd be kicking themselves that they didn't have it won by half time. So there's positives and negatives to it. Their attack it's as good as it can be, really, without obviously taking out Shane O'Donnell, but you still have your. I think Patrick Crowley could have a good season for Clare if you add him in. You still have your Tony Kellys in there, your Aidan McCarthy's, but their defence will probably have to sort of tighten up a small bit. But at the same time, when you look at the goals that Cork have scored in the last couple of games, 4 against Galway, 6 against Clare, 3 against Tip, it could be another afternoon where I actually agree with Seamus. I think it will be a 4-point victory for Cork.
Especially, Liam, when you factor in how goal hungry Cork have been.
Exactly.
In the league campaign, like once they've got the sense that their foot is on the neck, they really try and cause maximum damage. And we saw it in the league game against Clare, like 6 goals. Like, if Clare show some vulnerability, I think Cork will go for the goals quite early in the first 20 minutes. I really believe that. And I think if they put a bit of daylight between them, it could be a tough battle for Clare. Again, it's just about how Cork manage, the expectations and the hype on them, because they will be expected to win this game.
Yeah, definitely so. And we're all predicting Cork win. Just 3 more comments on this game before we move on. Brian saying here, Cork are very worthy and deserved All Ireland favourites. Shane O'Donnell is a big loss, will put even more pressure on Tony Kelly and on Alan Tynan as well. Alan Tynan was sent off wrongly in Nolan Park, didn't make contact with the head. So yeah, those are the comments from Brian. And we'll move on to the next game, and that is Tipperary against Limerick in FBD Semple Stadium, live on GA Plus on Sunday at 4 p.m. This is quite an interesting one in terms of Tipperary were very, very good in the league up until the final, obviously, where they got swatted aside pretty easily by Cork in that game. Limerick, you don't actually know where they're at. They had some young players come into the panel, the likes of Paddy O'Donovan, for example, and Aidan O'Connor. Their older, more established players are coming back in the team right about now. You honestly don't know where this Limerick team are at. So it's quite an interesting game. I'll go to you on this one, Liam. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know what's more interesting here, the Tip response or the Limerick one, especially like after their defeat to Cork and in the manner that they lost as well, essentially torn apart for the final 15-20 minutes of the first half in particular. It was really brutal to watch from a Tipperary perspective, how easily Cork were able to break them apart. And I mean, any chance that they had sniffing a goal, they took their chances. Liam Cahill is going to need his side to essentially turn up and keep their defence intact, because if they don't, then Limerick could do the exact same thing due to them having, a somewhat similar stellar attack. Now, if they allow the likes of Aidan O'Connor, Shane O'Brien, Aaron Gallan to get chances, they'll be punished. And you saw how a fast team damaged Tip 2 weeks ago. The team selection was very interesting from John Kiley. That depends as well on who's injured and who's not. It'll be very interesting to see who's actually available to him or not, given the players that he did lose throughout the league campaign. Like you're thinking, does Adam English start in midfield? Does Cian Lynch drop to midfield? Does Darragh O'Donovan come back in? Does Will O'Donoghue go there? Does Kyle Hayes go to centre back? Does Declan Hannon come back in? Does he trust Aidan O'Connor, which I think he should? I think he's a terrific corner forward. He had a really, really good league campaign. Even seeing him, I was at the Limerick Galway game, and seeing him, this movement and the way he was able to spray the ball over the bar from difficult angles was really impressive to see. Does Colin Coughlin get trusted again, at wing back? So it'll be interesting to see what he does go with, and whether the players that he did supposedly find in the league campaign, whether he can trust them fully or not from now on. Tip, on the other hand, I feel it'll be a bit more obvious about who they'll be starting. A bar maybe your Dara Stakelums or your Seamus Kennelly's, who'd be very much warranted a start as well, to be fair to the two of them. So, but yeah, I mean, aside from that, I feel we can all guess what the starting team's going to be. They need players to perform. They need to lay down a marker early doors and use home advantage at their disposal as well. They seem to perform a bit better at Semple Stadium against Limerick than they do in the Gaelic grounds, but they need Jake Morris to be on song fully. They need Darren McCarthy to get scores. They need Garrod O'Connor to put in a better performance than he did the league final. He was fairly quiet. He was quiet enough in the game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And I don't like saying that, 'cause I think he's a very good player. He's big and he's strong. He's a great free taker as well. Did very well for UL in the Fitzgibbon. So yeah, they came close to Limerick in the league. A lot of people were thinking, is that because Limerick didn't have their full strength team out? I think Limerick probably will get over the line just about, but I do expect Tipperary to be competitive, certainly a lot more competitive than what we've seen against them over the last couple of years, for sure.
And it's quite an interesting kind of a element to this as well, Seamus, about this Tipperary Limerick game, because I was just doing research on Cork tickets more than anything else, and all the tickets for Cork were sold out in the 4 games, including the Waterford game, which was round 5. In this Tippett Limerick game, I was checking the tickets as recently as last week, and there were still terrace tickets available for this game. That would worry me about the Tipperary support still. We've seen it last year where Cork packed out their whole stadium in Thurles last season. Could that be the downfall of Tipperary this year? The support, they don't necessarily get the backing compared to other Munster counties.
No, I think Tipperary are at a different stage to Cork. Like, the thing that is powering Cork towards, the level that they're at, and I don't mean this in any sort of a disrespectful way. It's like, it's the same thing happened with the Dubs, the same thing happened with Offaly. It's like, you have your hardcore support who are there through thick and thin, and then once you feel like you're heading towards a very special year where you're gonna, achieve memorable success, then everybody's on the bandwagon then. And every Tom, Dick and Harry is buying tickets for all the games. And Cork this year, it feels like, they're on their way to a very, very, very special year. And look, it all started with the game against, and I'm not trying to take away from the fans at all. When the Cork team put out the call for that, game against Limerick in the Munster Championship and said, look, we need your support, we need you all to come down. Cork fans packed out Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and it was an amazing atmosphere, and the scenes on the pitch at the end, it felt like the players and the fans, it felt like they were in it together, and they were on that journey together, and they'd survived together. And that's why there's such a strong bond now between the fans and the team. It's like a real thing in Cork now to go to all the hurling games. But if you were to go back 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think there's the same, die hard, let's sell out every game type energy around it. It's now this year that it feels like there's something special around it. And Matthew, please correct me if I'm wrong here. That's just from an outsider's perspective looking in, is that because it feels like there's something special, there's that level of buy-in that is so, so special when your county gets it. Donegal had it in 2012. Just plenty of examples of it that you can find. But yeah, for Tip, it feels like they're at a very early stage of this journey. It feels like Liam Cahill is in the process of overhauling the squad from the Noel McGrath and Jason Ford era and the All Irelands of 2016 into the new era with the Shawnee Keneallys and the Oisin O'Donoghues and the Dara Stakelums and the Dara McCarthy's. And it feels like they're in a kind of weird middle ground where they don't really know whether they should go more with the old guard or whether they should just back the youth that they have. And the thing is that I think I was saying this to you, Matt, it was like Cork's time feels like it's now, whereas Tipperary's time feels like it might be a couple of years down the line. And that was definitely shown in the league final. Cork looked levels ahead of Tip that day. And for Limerick, I'm more interested in Limerick this season than I am almost in any county bar Cork, because the team that Limerick are always compared to, and this is why I'm so interested in their season this year, the team they're always compared to is that Kilkenny team of the late 2000s under Brian Cody that did the 4 in a row and nearly did the 5 in a row, got to the final. And everybody was debating, who's the greatest team of all time? Is it, is it that Limerick team or is it that Kilkenny team? Now, what did the Kilkenny team do when they lost the All-Ireland final to Tip in 2010? They came back and they won the next 2 All-Irelands in 2011 and 2012. And even though they lost in 2013, they came back and they won again in 2014 and 2015. And they just proved that they were the dominant team of that era. And they proved that 2010 and 2013 were hiccups, but that normal service had resumed after that. Limerick, if they want to be compared on the level with Kilkenny, in all time, they need to come back and win it again. And they're very capable of doing that. They haven't lost really anybody apart from Nicky Quaid, who obviously is a gigantic loss. But apart from that, they're still as strong. And players like Adam English have really, really added to the squad. Do not forget how good this Limerick team is, man. Like, I would not be surprised if they have their hands back on Liam McCarthy at the end of the year, because in my opinion, they're right up there with that Kilkenny team as the greatest team of all time. And that's why I can't wait for this All-Ireland, man. It's going to be unbelievable.
It definitely is, no doubt about it. Brian, was another 2 comments in here about the podcast here. Referees will be under massive pressure with the head-eye challenges, and also the throw ball is a big issue. Up to the league final, Tip's spine was very solid, and the defence looked much better, concerning how Cork's running game and pace easily exposed Tip's defence. And Gavin coming in with a comment in here: would Kerry give it a Tipperary a game, or is the gap still far too big? No way, Gavin. To be honest, like I know we got the Kerry.
I think Kerry will struggle. I think Kerry will get relegated from the Joe McDonough, so I certainly don't think so.
But losing Fionn McAtee is that's their best player, like.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think that's a safe enough answer for you there, Gavin. But I think we're all backing Limerick to win this game, are we?
Yeah, I'd back Limerick, but it's a massive opportunity for Tip to lay down a marker as well, because Liam Cahill's teams now always get brandished with you look great in the league and then do nothing in the championship when it comes around. And look, they've fallen at the league final, but they looked solid in the league up until that point. If they get swept out the gate by Limerick this weekend, all those criticisms of Liam Cahill's teams will come roaring back. So I think they'll be desperate to lay down a marker. I don't think they'll win, but I think we'll be closer than people think. And go Limerick by 3.
Yeah, I'd probably say Limerick as well. It'll be a close enough game. It won't be a hammering. I think Limerick will get over the line. Just before we move on, Liam, you're saying Limerick as well?
Limerick by 1 point.
Yeah, I think so as well. Limerick will go on and win this game. Another comment in here from Brian. Tip have a great chance to make a statement and win. They certainly do. We'll see what Tip do offer this weekend. So we'll move on to the Leinster Hurling Championship. And there's one live game this weekend, which is quite disappointing, but it is Kilkenny against Galway in Nolan Park on Saturday at 3:45. This game is on RT1, not RT2, because Connacht and the Stormers are playing in the URC on RT2. So just so anybody is not in the know, the game is on RT1, not RT2. So yeah, Seamus, I suppose this is kind of a tricky one to kind of comprehend in many ways, because you looked at the game last year, Kilkenny played a second or third team and got a draw in Salt Hill. Galway were not on colour last year. They seem to be a lot better this year in terms of the league. I know there was still patchy form and whatnot, but they still have found some good finds, the likes of Loch Ray boys and Shane Morgan and Anthony Burns in particular. What do you expect out of this game?
Yeah, I do think that point that you made there about Galway being off colour, we have to take that into this year's championship when previewing Galway. They were really, really bad last year. Like, I couldn't believe how quickly they folded against Dublin, for example. Once they got the red card, Dublin like absolute cakewalk that game was. And yeah, it was just they weren't on it at all. The defeat to Wexford, the bad performance against Kilkenny, like they just weren't themselves, especially for the hurlers that they still have. So Micheál Donoghue coming back in was a good appointment, but we made the point, Matthew, when he joined, that he's returning to a very different Galway team than the one he left in 2019. Like the one he left in 2019, going into that 2019 season, was seen by a lot of people as front runners for the All Ireland. And this team, nobody's really picking Galway as front runners for the Ireland. So he's building from a much lower base. He's having to bring through a lot of new stars into the team. He's building the team now around a new generation, the likes of Gavin Lee at centre half back, and talented players up the pitch like Declan McLaughlin, etc. So, look, the reality is they're in a different position, but I think they're also playing against a Kilkenny team that is in a weird place right now. It's 10 years since Kilkenny got their hands on Liam McCarthy, and that's quietly now become like, when's the last time Kilkenny ever went 10 years without winning an All Ireland? You have to go back to, is it the 90s? Well, like in the 90s, did they win one in the 90s? I believe they did.
I'm trying to think. We won 94, Clare were 95, Wexford 96, Clare 97, Offaly 9, Cork 99. I think they won one, maybe it was in 93 or 92 or something. Yeah, somewhere around that time.
Tip won a couple at the start of the 90s, I know that, but 93 up until 2000, and 2000.
2000,
Like,
yeah.
they've had a long lineage of always winning All Irelands, at least every 5 or 6 years. And quietly now they've slipped into a period where they have actually been falling further and further away. I personally think that this Kilkenny team would get schooled by the 2022 team that Brian Cody had. Like, I just think that team was better. They've lost some big players from that team. Yeah, I don't know. Where would you put Kilkenny at this year, lads? Do you think they're front runners? I think they'll win
In,
Leinster, but for All
in
Ireland
terms,
terms, I'm not sure.
yeah. In terms of a ranking, I know obviously 4 teams can't make it out of Munster, but I'd honestly put them 5th, below Tip, Clare, Limerick, and Cork.
Below Tip.
But right now, yeah. Look, the way Tip absolutely slaughtered them in Nolan Park.
3 red cards, though.
I know, but Seamus, they lost the head that day, Kilkenny, and that was what concerned me about that day.
Even before the 3 red cards, Tipperary were dumb. If anything, Kilkenny played better with the 12 men than they did with the 15. So, in terms of ranking them, I kind of between them and Tip, probably difficult, but they're certainly behind. They're certainly behind Cork and Limerick anyway. They're the best side in Leinster. There's no question about that. I think they'll win Leinster this year, but I don't think it'll be as comfortable as it has been over the last couple of years. They don't have as strong a panel as they've had over the last couple of years, and they can certainly compete with a Limerick or a Cork on their day, or like obviously a Clare or a Tip, whoever gets out of Munster. But in terms of winning the All Ireland, if they manage to get to the final, credit to them. And sure, listen, it's Kilkenny in an All Ireland final, much like Kerry or much like Dublin. You just never know. But I don't see them taking down this current Cork or Limerick panel as well. And in terms of Galway, again, I said it on Aaron's podcast. I was born in Galway. I love Galway, but they're finishing 4th in Leinster. I don't rate them.
4th. God damn.
4th.
But seriously though, like, picking you up on that point is it just hit me there. You go back to 2019 when Micheál Donoghue left. Kilkenny, in my opinion, were better 5 years ago than they are now. Galway were better 5 years ago than they are now. Wexford were better 5 years ago than they are now. I think Dublin and Offaly are probably the only two that you could argue. Offaly definitely are better than they were 5 years ago, but Dublin maybe a little bit better than they were 5 years ago. But like the big 3 in terms of the teams that have won Leinster in the last 6 years, they've fallen far, in my opinion. Galway haven't even won it. Galway haven't won it since 2018. Crazy. Because when you look at Kilkenny and you look at, because I remember seeing the stat that like they've 4 Leinsters in a row or something, and I was like, they don't give the impression of 4 in a row. Like, you know the way that Limerick give you that impression of how many Munsters they've won in a row, and you're like, yeah, they are the greatest in Munster, and they have been the greatest. Yeah, like with Kilkenny, you don't get that sense.
No, I agree fully. I agree fully. Kilkenny, Galway, Wexford are not the same. Like Wexford will feel 2019 was a missed opportunity. Galway were extremely close to Limerick in 2020. Even in 2022 with Henry Shefflin was there.
Yeah.
Okay, they were fairly average in that Leinster final, but they bet Kilkenny in the round robin. They lost to Limerick by 3 points in the All Ireland semi final. Even that team was much better.
I remember Brian Concannon's goal. I remember being like, holy shit, if like Galway could actually smash and grab here. And I keep looking back at that moment thinking if Joe Cannon was still around and they brought him on in the last 15, 20 minutes when the game was in the melting pot like that, that might have been the push to get them over the line. Like I think that was a massive missed opportunity for Galway. But the last 2 years, Kilkenny and Galway have been nowhere close to Limerick. And anytime they played them, they've been blown away.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's a few comments coming here, flying in actually. So great to see, obviously. Rudders are saying here, Tip in beating Limerick league final will leave its mark on them, I feel. He also said here about Galway and on Liam's comments about Galway finishing 4th. I'm guessing Galway will finish 2nd, still ahead of Dublin and Wexford. You're missing one county there, Rudders.
I agree with Rudders. Apart from obviously forgetting the county, but I think Galway will finish 2nd and Kilkenny will finish top. Like, if we're calling a spade, they beat us in the Leinster final last year, but we were shite. Like, no one has stood up to them. Like, they got that goal inside 3 minutes, and that was game, set, match once that hit the net. They haven't faced a real challenge since the Galway Leinster final a couple of years ago.
Gavin's putting in a very interesting comment here about the Leinster Championship. Could the Leinster Championship be expanded, or would the Joe McDonagh still be needed? What I'd actually do, Gavin, in terms of that, and this might be an interesting kind of suggestion, I'd actually have 10 teams in the Leinster Championship, 2 groups of 5, and you'd have a pot 1 team, say, pot 1 seed would be Kilkenny, Galway, C2 will be Wexford, Dublin, C3, Offaly and Antrim. And then you could bring the top 4 Joe McDonagh teams into Leinster. And I think that would definitely benefit the teams that are currently in the Joe McDonagh and help them raise their profile a small bit. I don't know what you lads think about it.
It's a very interesting one. No question about it. I do think maybe would it have some sort of a knock-on effect to the Kilkennys, the Galways, that they're not playing the same level of competition that the Munster teams are. Like, the Munster teams are having 4 wars against teams that, you know, probably would be, you know, serious contenders for the All-Ireland should they get out. Whereas you look at if Kilkenny and Galway, the toughest game that they'll have will be against each other. It's an interesting one. I definitely think it would be more important, though, and more long-term to switch to a model like that. Because you look at Antrim, you look at Westmeath, you look at especially Westmeath, actually. Westmeath and Laois are the 2 best examples of that. And I hope Offaly can break the trend now over this next year. But Laois and Westmeath, they've made tremendous strides. Got into the Leinster Championship, got some big wins, big performances, pushed teams all the way. But they were usually relegated inside the first year that they got promoted. Or if they weren't in the first year, they went down the second year. And eventually all that good work just kind of went out the window. Carlow, it actually happened to Carlow as well around 2018, 2019. And they went down, and then they're after rebuilding again and coming back up. But then even though they drew with Kilkenny, they still went down, and now they have to go again. And whereas if it was 10 teams, Carlow, Antrim, Westmeath, they'd get to build on a really, really, really solid base that, you know, they'd be more likely to stay in the Leinster Championship for another year. And it's more long-term because then the standards of those teams could get better and lead to the Leinster Championship becoming as competitive.
This comment in here, I'd actually love that as well.
What an atmosphere that would be. An atmosphere that would be. The atmosphere would be unbelievable, man.
Yeah, I'd snap your hand off right now for that. Even just in terms of the comment there about judging off the league campaign, I'm not even just judging it off the league campaign. I listen, I love Galway. I love to see them win the All-Ireland football this year. I was born in Galway. My favourite hurler of all time is Joe Canning. I've all the time in the world for them. But I've seen them not just last year in the this year in the league, where, like, I will say again, I saw them in person against Limerick. They just looked well off the pace. And I mean, the biggest challenges they got in the league, they failed them all realistically. I know they bet Kilkenny in the league, but Kilkenny had a poor league campaign. Clare had a poor league campaign. They just about got over Wexford, who had a terrible league campaign, especially in Wexford Park. But just the championship last year, they were awful. Like, they were awful in last year's championship. They, like you said earlier, Kilkenny last year were missing Owen Cody. They were missing, was it Adrian Mullen, Owen Murphy, and someone else. And they just about scraped a draw. They got basically hammered by Dublin in the final round. I know the red card say didn't help them, but at the same time, Dublin were much better on the day, and there was only ever going to be one winner in that second half. You never had a feeling Galway were going to get over the line in that encounter. Wexford demoralised them in Wexford Park, and I think Micheál Donoghu's the right man to bring back. He's won the All-Ireland with them. He's won the Leinster title. He's brought through brilliant players, and they do still have terrific players in their panel. And I'm looking forward to seeing the likes of Anthony Burns, how he gets on in the championship. He's been a good find in the league. But I just have a feeling like they have a bad record in Parnell Park. Well, they have a bad record in Dublin anyway. I have a feeling Dublin could pit them in the final round. I have a weird feeling Wexford could just snatch a draw in Pearse Stadium. I mean, I don't think we'll beat them. I don't think we're at that level yet. And I don't think Antrim will beat them either. But I still think, and I think Kilkenny will beat them this weekend. So I'm just doing the maths in my head. I don't see Galway getting through. I'm still debating about whether I think it'll be Wexford or Dublin in the Leinster final, but I think Galway will finish fourth. And I don't want them to. I do like Galway, and I have a great time for them. But I just think, like you said earlier, Seamus, they're not the team they used to be a couple of years ago. They have a good bunch of younger players coming through from their under-20 setup, but until they get some of those implemented into their team, I think it's going to be a tough couple of weeks for them. So watch them now go win the All-Ireland, and I look like an idiot in July. But sure, look.
McDonald's or Supermax?
So I have to say Supermax. I do like Supermax, to be fair. So, and I've interviewed Pat McDonough before, so he's probably never going to talk to me again. So, but
there you go.
Very interesting.
For Galway, man.
Very interesting comment here from Brian. Sorry to parade on obviously the fast food giants there, but Brian puts in a comment in here: Clare aren't in his top four. Kilkenny take up 3 and 4 spots.
I think it's crazy to not have Clare in your top 3. Like the reigning All-Ireland champions. Like,
I just do wonder, is there hunger there this year? I think if you were looking
they still haven't won Munster. They still haven't completed the set. I said it to Jer, who was on my show regularly, like as passionate, as diehard a Clareman as I've ever met in my life. And I said to him, if I could give you one next year, one guarantee, you'll win Munster or you'll win the All-Ireland, which are you picking?
Munster. And
he was like, it's a really hard decision to make. It's a really hard one to call. So you got from that how badly they want to win Munster. And it would be crazy if Tony, if Shane O'Donnell, if John Conlon, if they retire with 2 All-Irelands and no provincial medal. Like, I think they'll be the only group of players that's ever done that. So they need to complete the set. And I think this year is, in my opinion, now or never, because I think Cork are only going to get stronger. And I think Tip as well, as I said, I think 2 years down the line, they're right in the mix for All-Ireland. So I think Clare, there's the feeling of now or never about it.
We're getting slightly sidetracked here, but Kilkenny and Galway, unless there's any objections, Kilkenny will win the game. So we'll move swiftly on from that and on to the next game. And the battle begins. Dublin against Offaly in Parnell Park on Saturday at 6 p.m. Lads, the floor is yours.
Don't go, Matthew. You're a good crack. Yeah, I suppose I'll start. I'll be at the game, so I'm looking forward to it. I mean, give me Dublin, Wexford, Kilkenny, Galway games any day of the week over playing the Derrys and the Wicklows and the Christie Ring like we were a couple of years ago. These are the games that you want to be playing, especially from our point of view. And look, Seamus, I'll give it to you. I think you will just pip us this weekend. I think it is in Parnell Park. It's a massive event. If it was in Croke Park, I actually would give us a bit more of a chance. But I think Parnell Park suits you a lot more. Like, you even see it in the big example last year. You play Kilkenny in Parnell Park, you should have beaten them. You play them in Croke Park, they tear you apart. You just, because of all the players there, they're so used to it with the club, and it's a tight pitch, smaller pitch. You're able to strike the ball over the bar a lot easier. I think it just will suit Dublin a lot more. I think we'll put in a better account of ourselves than what we did in our last Leinster Championship game against you in 2018, where you sent us down and probably rightfully sent us down. We were just not at that level at that time. But I do think we'll put in a better performance this time. We've to put up with the likes of stopping Donald Burke, which is going to be a very tricky thing to do. Your AJ Murphy's, who's in my opinion one of the best full forwards in Leinster. On his day he can terrorize any fullback. Kieran Burke is going to have to be on his game on Saturday to stop him if he does start, of course. But I imagine he will. Sean Curry's a player I'd love to see playing. Well, not love, because I don't want him to, because I do like him a lot as a player. But you look at at Smith at the back, there's a David Lucy at the back as well, Chris Crummy. These are big, towering men for Dublin as well at the back, which they're going to be right up for it as well. Like I don't expect someone like Dan Burke to be marking Chris Crummy. You'd probably leave that to a Killian Sampson or a Nusheen Kelly or maybe a Brian Dignan, just someone a lot bigger, and you'd allow Dan Burke to sweep back into the midfield a bit until, he never runs out of legs. I don't know how he doesn't, but he never stops running. It's a game that's too soon for Adam Screeney, in my opinion. Like I don't want to see him. Look, it'd be great, I suppose, in a way, if he was playing, but I think give him a couple of minutes and get him slowly back to fitness. Don't be rushing him back, because then you're just doing more damage to the young lad, and that's not what we need, especially from our point of view as well. Trying to build for under 20 as well. But yeah, no, I think Niall O'Callaghan as well, especially with it being his first game in the championship as well. I think he'll want to make a good impression as well. You looked at Gilroy in 2018, nearly pulled off a big win against Kilkenny in his first game, and how much, in a way, that did him good. I was surprised he left in 2018. Mahi Kenny trying to, was going well against Kilkenny in the first game in Nolan Park before Kilkenny eventually won the game, but you saw what it did for them. They managed to see off Galway later on in the championship. So I feel O'Callaghan, especially after losing to us in Croke Park as well, will want to put that right. Will want to get the best out of his own crop of Na Fianna players as well, and get the best out of the other players as well. So it'd be interesting to see what lineup Dublin go with. It'd be interesting to see who we go with in the forward line, in the half back line as well. Whether Shirley stays a centre back, or we bring, if Keelan Kiley's back fit, if we bring him back in, or switch Donald Shirley back to wing back. So yeah, no, it'll be an interesting game. Really looking forward to it. Great to have the championship back. And look, this is a game that Offaly will target. Probably this one and the Wexford one will be the two games we'll be targeting the most. But I just think with Parnell Park home advantage, I think Dublin just might see us off by a couple of points in the end. But I think it'll be a cracking game, and it's a shame it's not on TV for others to watch.
Interesting. Seamus, from a Dublin point of view, the thing is, I probably would have said Offaly as probably dark horses for the championship overall, because they have some excellent young players, and the momentum seems to be with Offaly at this present moment in time. But concerning Dublin, they're at home in Parnell Park. Neil O'Callaghan, obviously excellent manager with Na Fianna. They have the Na Fianna boys that really impress. And I know I've obviously seen it first. So is Liam with Kilcormac Calais. I've seen it with SARS. They are brilliant players. The likes of AJ Murphy, the Curry brothers, Conor McHugh at full back as well. What impresses me about AJ Murphy in particular is what he actually does with the possession with the ball. He's absolutely brilliant at that, in fairness, at full forward. Every possession he gets, he takes a shot. So it's going to be very, very difficult to stop him if AJ Murphy does play. Would you expect a lot of the Fianna boys to start in this game?
I hope so. That's coming from a Whitehall Column Killsman. Like, Na Fianna are one of our biggest rivals as clubs, but you can't deny how great that they were in the club championship, and they swept to, a glory in Dublin championship that had been a long time coming a couple of years ago, then consolidated it and kicked on to win the All-Ireland. And look, they were superb throughout the entire year, and they went through every single challenge, every single type of test that you could ask that champions go through. For O'Callaghan then to leave the post and take the Dublin job, look, there's no beating around the bush. Like, it would have been a massive letdown for them that they didn't get promoted out of Division 1B. That would have been the goal. Losing that game to Offaly was particularly costly, because not only had we dropped points, but Offaly had gained them, and that is ultimately what cost us our promotion. That and the defeat to Waterford. We lost the two most difficult games in the league. So O'Callaghan will definitely feel a need to get a result in this game. I do agree with what Liam said. I think Croke Park, massive open space. It gives the Offaly speedsters a lot of chance to get the legs on the Dublin defenders. Whereas in Parnell Park, it's a lot tighter. Dublin's defence is made up by lads like Paddy Smith, Chris Crummy. They're absolute monsters. They're absolutely huge when you stand next to these lads. And we've gone toe to toe with, on paper, better teams than us in Parnell Park, and we've really put them to the pin of their collar because of that, tight pitch, really, really physical battle. And we've taken them all the way to the wire, just like we did Kilkenny last year, and we ultimately came out the wrong side of the result. I think for Offaly, they could really bloody us up, though. I really think Offaly, our flair team, they're very capable of getting the run on you and then really doing damage. And I think the league defeat was a real warning shot to us of what they're capable of. But I think we'll shade it. Just being in Parnell Park, home comforts. I think if they line out with a lot of those in the final, as Liam rightly pointed out, played the whole summer last year, the whole end of summer and autumn on Parnell Park's pitch, they're very familiar with it. They know it like the back of their hand. And a tight, crowd in there. I think we might shade it in a very, very close game. It's given me the vibe of kind of Antrim. You remember when Antrim really put it up to Dublin in the league? I think it was a draw or something, or Leash. When we really knew there was a game and we just about shaded it. Then when we had our home comfort, I could see it probably going a similar way.
Yeah, I'd probably go for Dublin as well as the two other lads in the pod here to shade it against Offaly. But look at the last game in Leinster, and I'll go to you, Liam, on this. Wexford against Antrim. Obvious, really, Wexford are going to win this game. And it's going to be worrying for Antrim in terms of the games that they have in Leinster. I think the only thing that's kind of keeping them afloat is the media attention. As a matter of fact, is what's Davy Fitz going to turn up with in this Leinster Championship. But you would imagine Wexford at home, they should be the Antrim.
Yeah, I just don't see where Antrim can win this game. And that seems harsh as people will bring up the Davy factor. But Antrim, they don't travel well. They simply don't. When they're in Corrigan Park, they're a different animal. But away on their travels, they are extremely, extremely poor. And we saw that, evidenced by their league campaign, the performances in Dublin, the performance in O'Connor Park. I know they came back to draw against Carlow, but they definitely, I don't know how they even managed to do that. Carlow would have definitely been kicking themselves after that game. Wexford finished the league strong, big wins away to Clare and into Limerick. They've Lee Chin back, they've Rory O'Connor in there. So I think they'll have tougher challenges ahead of them. And look, Antrim do have the talent, they've the Owen Campbells and the James McNaughtons of the world. But I just think Antrim realistically should be able to put it up to Wexford. And let's not forget they did beat them in Belfast last summer. But again, it seems like a lazy argument and a lazy bit of analysis, but they do not travel well at all. And, once they step out of their comfort zone in a way of Corrigan Park, you even saw with their footballers last weekend, if they'd have played Armagh anywhere else bar Corrigan Park, it'd have been a completely different game, in my opinion. The fact it was up there, they put it up to them in the first half. And in the end, they done themselves proud against the All-Ireland champions. And similarly here, they go away from home. I think it's going to be a very tough afternoon for them. I think Wexford will have too much for them.
Yeah, I'd imagine Wexford will get over the line as well, and I'm sure Seamus is thinking the same thing, and Wexford will win this game against Antrim. We've got to the Joe McDonagh Cup, and a big game this weekend in terms of that to start things off. Carlow against Down, two sides that really impressed in the league. This game is on Saturday at 2:30 p.m. in Netwatch Cullen Park. I'll go to you on this one, Seamus. Carlow didn't lose to Offaly. They drew against Offaly. They beat Waterford, which was an amazing statistic considering Waterford and Offaly were teams to actually go up to Division 1A. They competed with Dublin and Parnell Park as well. But Down winning the Division 2A title, or 2 title, that was an absolutely brilliant achievement in itself for them. You have some brilliant players on show, obviously, for both sides. The likes of Chris Nolan for Carlow, the likes of Martin Mouse Kavanagh, of course. You have Down players like Tom McGrattan and Piers Oak McCrickard in the team there. You have some excellent players on both sides of the coin. It's an interesting one to start things off in the Joe McDonagh.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting one because we've got a Carlow side there who showcased what they're capable of again in the league, beating Waterford. I think it was for the first time ever that they beat Waterford in the hurling. Then on top of that, last year, they drew with Kilkenny in an incredible performance and probably were unlucky not to beat them on that day. And they were very, very unlucky to get relegated from the Leinster Championship. But they know that they're good enough to mix it with the teams that are in Leinster right now this year. So Carlow, you'd have to imagine, are one of the front runners to win the John McDonagh and go back up to the Liam McCarthy Cup next year. Therefore, for Down, this is a brilliant litmus test to see where they're at. They won Division 2A, beating a very, very good Kildare side in the final, which showcases the talent that they have. That day, Tom McGrattan's first touch for his goal is one of the best first touches I've ever seen. Like, he just takes it down, with the back hand of his hurl and then straight into his hand, then buries it into the back of net. Unbelievable finish. Then, for them, surely they have to be eyeing up Antrim just as the local rival. That, like, Antrim have stalled, it seems, over the last couple of years. They made unbelievable headway under Darren Gleeson. They got famous wins, over Clare in the league in 2021. Really, that was a statement win. But they have slowed down. And Davy coming in, they haven't got that bounce that Davy Fitz's teams usually get when he comes in. And I cannot wait for them to go head-to-head with Antrim in Division 1B next season, because I think Down are going to challenge Antrim for who is the best hurling team in Ulster right now, because I think Down's trajectory is heading up, and I think Antrim's, at the very least, is stalling right now. So to see how Down get on against Carlow would be very, very interesting, with a potential matchup with Antrim down the line over the next 12 months. But I think Carlow are just a step too far for Down right now. I think that the level that they've been playing out at the last 2 years will do them good. And I think players like Chris Nolan, Marty Kavanagh, James Doyle as well is always one that I like there in the inside forward line. I think they have too much for them, and I think Carlow get over the line.
Yeah, I think Carlow do get over the line as well. It should be a very interesting game, no doubt about it. I think two of the Joe McDonagh 3 games are actually streamed live on Club. I'm just checking which ones are actually streamed live, but that is brilliant in terms of the promotion of the game.
All 3 of them are being streamed, actually. I just
all 3 of them
earlier, yeah. And I think it's brilliant. It was like, I was on Erasmus last year. I was able to watch every Offaly game on Club or in the Joe McDonagh, which was, massive credit to them. They're doing brilliant stuff to try and promote the game, especially in counties like Down or Kildare, where you'd be mostly associating with them, their football teams. But yeah, no, it's great that they're showing all the games this weekend. It is mad, though, that you can watch all the Joe McDonagh games, so you can't watch 2 of the Leinster Championship games. When you do think of it, it's crazy to think that. But I suppose, look, it's just the way it is at the moment. Hopefully that might change soon. But yeah, Carlow should see off Down, and I think Carlow will be too strong in the Joe McDonagh as well. I think they're clearly the best side in it. I think they're a side that should be probably playing Leinster hurling at the moment. They're certainly good enough to compete with some of the teams in it. And like you said there, with the 10-team system, it might not actually be a bad idea, to be honest with you, just to even get teams used to playing against top teams. Like if you had Laois playing against Kilkenny's or Dublin's or Wexford's every year, if you had Downs and Kildare's doing the same thing, or if Meath were able to come up maybe the following year and do the same thing, it would only do them the world of good as well to see what level they need to get to. So, but yeah, for the moment, yeah, Carlow should have enough for Down. But I do expect Down to have a decent season in the Joe McDonagh. I certainly don't see them going down, pardon the pun, and I certainly don't. I actually have a feeling they could potentially finish above Westmeath if things go essentially tits up for them like it did last year.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll go through the other 2 Joe McDonagh Cup games here as well. Speaking of teams stalling, and well, Liam mentioned them in just a while there, Westmeath. They're playing against Laois this weekend in Port Laois on Saturday at 3 p.m. The other game then to finish off Joe McDonagh talk is Kildare against Kerry in Newbridge at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Go to you, Liam, on this one. You would expect Laois and probably Kildare to come through these games. Well, Westmeath, they had Kieran Doyle and David Williams both in the top 10 scorers of Division 1B. They do have some brilliant players. So where do you think it's actually gone wrong for Westmeath? You'd obviously predict the home sides to win the games, but where's it gone wrong for Westmeath, do you think?
It's kind of hard to know. I suppose the whole sort of flip-flop, sorry, ignore if you've heard a ding on my phone. Yeah, no, I think the whole sort of flip-flop, kind of like what we had in the Premier League for years with, Norwich or Fulham kind of going up and down in the Premier League and the Championship, that yo-yo effect really, I feel hasn't helped them. Sort of similar to Kildare going up and down between the Christy Ring and the Joe McDonagh, whether it's, I don't know whether it's done them any good or not, to be honest with you, so for Westmeath, it's hard to know because they do have a lot of talented players. I mean, they have some top class clubs as well. They absolutely do. I know they don't have a club that's ever won a Leinster final or been in one, but like Casttown Gagan beat Thomastown comfortably in the Leinster Club Championship. They very nearly bet us in the Leinster semi-final only for Screeney's last-minute goal. So there are some really talented hurlers in Westmeath. You know, they've won the Joe McDonagh over the past couple of years. They beat Wexford so unexpectedly a couple of years ago. You know, I feel like that relegation against Antrim just was really detrimental to them as well. This current manager that they have, I don't know whether he's the most inspiring, you know, and I don't want to be digging at him or anything like that, but I don't know if he's the right man for the job for them. And like, listen, it's going to be a tricky campaign for them. I mean, like you said, they had some games. I mean, against Laois in the league, there was one point, I think there was only 2 points between them. They were mounting a bit of a comeback. They performed relatively good against us. I wasn't at the game, I was at another game, but they seemingly played well enough against us. But when you do dig deep into it, out of their 19 points, I think Killian Doyle scored 15. You know, so there's a heavy reliance on him as well to a degree. But then I feel like the conceding of 7 goals to Waterford could really damage them as well. I know Waterford is a completely different level to what they'll be playing in the Joe McDonagh, but just hammerings can do something to a team. And just especially with how poor Westmeath were in the Joe McDonagh last year, losing at home to Kerry, drawing against Down. I mean, they beat Laois, but Laois were resting all their players ahead of the Joe McDonagh final. And, you know, they were close against us, you know, which was why I was so surprised how they lost to Kerry and how they drew with Down at the time, because I was like, they could easily beaten us in Tullamore. You know, they played well enough on the day to warrant a victory, to be fair to them. But yeah, if they want to do anything in this season, they're going to have to beat Laois on Saturday. But I just don't see it as poor as a season Laois have had so far. I think they operate on a bit of a higher level as well. Yeah, I think Laois are the closest challengers to Carlow, and I certainly don't see them having any issue with Westmeath this weekend.
No, I don't think so either. And probably Kildare should beat Kerry as well. We mentioned Kerry earlier on the podcast. They seem like they're going on a downward trajectory rather than up. And it's just unfortunate in terms of their development. But that is the Joe McDonagh wrapped up. Just to wrap up the hurling, there are Christy Ring Cup games, Laurie Marr or Nicky Rackard and Laurie Marr all this weekend. And the games are along the bottom of the ticker there. So the Christy Ring Cup this weekend on Saturday, Donegal against Wicklow in Letterkenny at 2 p.m. You have Meath against Tyrone on Saturday, in Trim at 3 p.m. And then on Sunday, at 12:30 p.m. an early start there at Ruislip between London and Derry. We see the score that London put up against Meath. They'll be hoping for their second win in 2 weeks. Look at the Nicky Rackard Cup then. On Saturday, you have Armagh against Mayo in the Boxing Athletic Grounds in Armagh at 2 p.m. Also at 2 p.m. at Markievicz Park, if Sligo against Roscommon. That's at the Nicky Rackard Cup as well. And then on Sunday in Dundalk, you have Louth against Fermanagh at 2 p.m. That's at the Nicky Rackard as well. And then finally in the Laurie Marr Cup, all on Saturday. Starting off, it's a double header actually in Glen Brothers Pierce Park in Longford. The first game there is actually between Leitrim and Lancashire at 12 p.m. I don't know why that's in Longford, but that's what it says on the GA website. Anyway, Longford against Warwickshire is the curtain closer on that in the day in Glen Brothers Pierce Park at 2 p.m. on Saturday. And then at 3 p.m. on Saturday, you've Cavan against Monaghan and Kingspan Breffni in Cavan at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Any games that tickle your fancy there, Seamus? I suppose London, like against Derry, who are a decent hurling county, they'll be hoping to win 2 games in a row this weekend.
Yeah, certainly. London are kind of the standouts of last weekend after they scored the 5 goals against Meath, who looked pretty solid in Division 2A. And, you know, it was an incredible performance by London there. It's a real standout display and showing how much London hurling is on the rise. And you look at Nicky Rackard, Armagh against Mayo. Mayo, one of the teams that you'd expect to be kind of one of the front runners to win the Nicky Rackard, up against an Armagh side who kind of snuck out the door and Fermanagh with a win. So that one will be really, really interesting as well. Looking down then to the Laurie Marr, it's good to see a double header, Leitrim Lancashire and Longford Warwickshire. Like, that's definitely moving the right way. And then a rivalry there between Cavan and Monaghan, which kind of sells itself. But Cavan definitely, to me, look like the team to beat in the Laurie Marr, and I think they go back to back, and don't see anybody stopping them in the Laurie Marr this year. Be very interested to see how Donegal got on as well against Wicklow. They came almightily close to taking a serious scalp there against Derry in round 1. And this game then, by that same metric, will be one that you're looking at thinking, well, if they can put in a performance that is somewhat similar to the one that they put there away in Páirc na Gaeltacht against Derry, well then surely they're going to be good enough to get over the line against Meath. So yeah, good weekend of action coming up in these 3 cups.
Yeah, some interesting games, all right. And Donegal's game, in particular in the Christie Ring against Wicklow, definitely tickles my fancy. Anyway, I think Donegal will probably win that game. Against Wicklow, they're at home in Letterkenny, and that should be a win for Donegal. But we'll move on to the football. Just one more question here from Brian in the comments. Match to me, actually. Matthew, as a Cork man, what are you expecting as a Cork hurlers? It's a dangerous game, really, Brian. I was discussing this with someone during the week. If we lose to Clare and Ennis, I'm thinking the whole perception will kind of change. But right now, this is not derogatory or it's not biased. I think Cork will win the All-Ireland. And I've said this on Aaron's podcast. I've said it since December. Cork will win the All-Ireland. And that's not a biased view. I've been negative about Cork in the past, but this year I've been the most positive I've ever been. I think this is our year to win the All-Ireland. So that is my expectation of the Cork hurlers there, Brian. There was a comment in here earlier as we move on swiftly onto the football coverage from Shawnee earlier on. I was going to bring up when the football was on. Watch Tyrone and Cavan last Sunday. My God, it was a brutal game. Still far too much hand passing of the game. There should be a rule, 2 hand passes, or you have to kick it. Interesting enough, and that's obviously reverted back to the new rules there in terms of that. And we will move on to the football games now. Coincidentally, we'll start off with the Ulster Championship in the quarterfinals. Monaghan against Donegal in St. Helens Park, Clones at 2 p.m. on Sunday on GA+. I know the Cavan and Tyrone game at times was, as Paul Flynn described in RT last week, boringly good from Tyrone, which is probably the biggest compliment you could give them. But in terms of this game, Liam, like Monaghan coincidentally are the only team to beat a Jim McGuinness Donegal team in the Ulster Championship. Can they replicate that record and winning in Clones this weekend?
Well, first of all, yeah, Tyrone Cavan last weekend was a dreadful game. That's the, put it lightly. I found myself switching over to. I mean, I was watching. I had to watch the golf. I had to watch the early rounds of the golf instead. It was just so poor to watch. Nothing to do with the fact that we lost to Meath and I was in a petty mood. But yeah, no, it's. I have to say, it's. This is going to be a fascinating encounter, and it's actually a real shame that this is on at the same time as Clare and Cork, because it's a game that you just love to give your full attention to, but it's a game I'll have on the background. I'll watch it alongside the Cork and Clare game. But yeah, hopefully it'll be worth watching, because both sides for me play really enjoyable football, especially Monaghan, given how I suppose a lot of people, probably myself maybe included, felt worried for them ahead of the season. Obviously after losing McManamus, whether they'd be able to sustain a level that they were able to maintain over the years, obviously reaching the semi-final in 18, in 23, winning the Ulster title when they did, was it 2015 when they won it, was it, I think? Or was it 2014?
They won the Ulster title in 15 and 13, yeah.
15, yeah, 13, yeah. That was, I couldn't remember what other year it was, but yeah, no, Gabriel Bannigan has done a great job with this squad, and they are coming in the right direction. And a win here in Clones I think will do wonders, and especially for excuse me, the Ulster Championship as well, because much like Munster, it's just a competition that at the moment, unlike kind of the rest of the provinces, you just don't know who's going to be the winner, and that's the beauty of it. And it's actually enjoyable to watch now. It was not enjoyable to watch throughout the 2010s. It was dire football to watch, whereas now teams are actually trying to play some bit of expansive football, and a good few of them are using the 2-point advantage to their advantage. So yeah, but for the likes of Michael Bannigan, Desi Ward, etc., they'll be key to Monaghan this weekend. I mean, and genuinely don't be surprised if Rory Beggan ends as the highest scorer in this game. Like, genuinely. I don't know who said it. It could have been on one of your podcasts, or someone put it online, that Rory Beggan could be the top scorer in the championship come the end of the year. And honestly, don't be shocked if he actually was the top scorer, because his free taking ability is unbelievable. He's ending every game with 5, 6, 7 points a game, more than outfield players. So I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if he did. I said it on Seamus' podcast a few weeks ago. I'm really excited to see Darragh O'Boyle again. He was outstanding against Derry. He was outstanding in the league campaign. I mean, Paddy McBrearty for me just has a left foot on par with David Clifford. It's a bold statement again, but his left foot is unbelievable. When you have Michael Murphy in there as well, as long as nobody tries to do an Aidan Forker on him, then he should be. But it might be the only way to stop him. But
if they do an Aidan Forker on him, he'll be just fine.
Yeah, he won't be too intimidated by that. Anyways, he'd be. I mean, considering he was taking big hits from who was it? Claremont Auvergne rugby players a couple of years ago on the toughest trade. I think it'd be okay against Monaghan footballers, but yeah, no, Conor and Shane O'Donnell have had really good seasons so far as well. For me, and it's a bit, again, I keep coming with bold statements. Pattern Morgan and Ryan McHugh for me could be arguably the best best wing back duo in the country, especially on their day. They are outrageous. I know it's a brave statement to be saying, but I feel in that mood today. But yeah, I think this would be a fitting final, to be honest. I think it's actually only up until yesterday I thought it was a semi-final. I completely forgot that it was a quarter-final, and it's kind of a shame. It'd be a perfect Ulster final, to be honest with you, for me, especially when you look at Donegal as one of the favourites for the All-Ireland, Monaghan winning Division 2, and I mean, in the end, quite comfortably in the final as well. So yeah, no, I don't see Fermanagh or Down beating either one of these sides in a semi-final. So I think whoever wins this realistically goes to the Ulster final.
Interesting commenting here from Gavin. It'll be interesting to see if Monaghan will be able to get the space and 2-pointers against Donegal like they did against the Division 2 teams. I felt Derry got through Donegal last round a bit as well. And Derry got a decent amount of 2-pointers, not really great amount. Obviously, Brian O'Riordan is also saying here, Monaghan Donegal will be an absolute belter of a game. Whoever wins this will win Ulster. Donegal have been really impressive and Monaghan have been outstanding, very close to call. Yeah, it is a close one to call, isn't it, Seamus? It's a very difficult one between two very good sides.
Very brave to dismiss Armagh Tyrone like that. We were talking there last week, Matthew, about Tyrone had a 75% conversion rate against Cavan. Armagh had an 81% conversion rate against Antrim. I think it's between them four for me as to who wins the Ulster title. I wouldn't be brave enough to call it any which way. I think that Donegal and Monaghan in this game, what we are seeing is we're seeing two teams who have fully embraced the new rules, fully embraced them, and really, really looked scintillating going forward throughout the league campaign. Liam's right there. McBrady looks like he's back to his best. Darrow Bweel is one of the best 2-point marksmen in the country right now. They didn't even start Oisin Gallen, and they didn't even start Jamie Brennan. Like, the strength and depth in this Donegal team is seriously, seriously underrated. Like, they've such a stacked panel now. And the parallels between McGuinness's first term and McGuinness's second term now, you cannot ignore them. They're going to be building in such confidence. But that being said, Monaghan are flying in as, serious competitors with Donegal, but yet they don't really have that much expectations on them. If Monaghan go down swinging in this game, I don't think people will be getting on their backs. Whereas if Donegal go down in this game, it will be a massive shock and a massive story around the country. But for Monaghan, they're going into this game with nothing to lose. They're going in as Division 2 champions who've been fantastic in all the games they've played, albeit not the Roscommon or the Down game on the final day where they were already promoted. But apart from that, they were superb in the Division 2 final, corrected the wrong in their defeat to Roscommon. And yeah, they've looked brilliant. It's going to be such an entertaining game. As you said, Monaghan are the only team to beat Jim McGuinness's Donegal in the Ulster Championship, which is still a crazy stat when you put it like that. But I would probably shade Donegal to retain Ulster right now, which means that I shade them to shade this game, but by the minimum.
Interesting. Brian is saying here in the comment, Donegal are a very strong starting 15 and equal as good players to come off the bench. That is definitely a very good point, Brian, no doubt about it. Yeah, I think Donegal was squeezed through in the end as well. Monaghan were very good at the Division 2 campaign. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if they went out and won this game, especially at home in Clonus. Like, you would imagine Monaghan will be mad up for this game. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see the likes of Bihal Bannigan, the likes of Jack McCarron, who performed really, really well in Division 2, how they can translate that form into the Ulster Championship. Yeah, Liam, you're saying a Donegal win, I'm assuming, as well?
Yeah, I think Donegal just might have a bit too much for them. Maybe 2-3 point game. Although I don't think Donegal will retain Ulster. I think they'll get to the final, but I think Armagh this year is sort of similar to what people are saying about Clare in the hurling. I feel Armagh will want to finally get over the line and win an Ulster title after the heartbreak that they've had. Well, as long as they don't get another penalty shootout, but in normal time, I think Armagh might just edge Ulster this year, but I certainly think Donegal will get over the line this weekend. But like you said, if Monaghan won, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world from a neutral point of view. You'd still get a good final. But yeah, I think Donegal might just edge it this weekend. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Monaghan did clinch it.
Yeah, exactly. So it should be a very interesting game. But we're all predicting Donegal to win it. But who will join them in the Ulster semi-final play against Donegal? What we're all predicting, obviously, it's Fermanagh against Down in Brewster Park in Enniskillen on Saturday at 4 p.m. This game is live on BBC Two Northern Ireland as well. What do you expect from this game, Seamus? Down are guaranteed in the Sam Maguire, obviously, and they were very, very unlucky to go down from Division 2, pardon the pun, obviously, back to Division 3. Fermanagh are a bit... It's a weird one to describe for Fermanagh. They haven't performed well in the championship over the last few years, but they have serious potential to do well in the championship. What do you expect out of this?
Yeah, this one will be a very, very interesting one. Like, Fermanagh are always a very, very difficult team to call, what level they're going to come in at. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, for example, like in the Tailteann Cup, I was picking them to be one of the front runners, and they were absolutely god-awful in that year's Tailteann Cup. They're very, very difficult to predict. Then at the same time, I've seen them put it up to teams that on paper are above the type of players that they have. Kieran Donnelly there is an exceptional coach. We saw, his expertise with the Ulster team in the FRC trial games. Like, that Ulster team played superb football under the lights, and he's a really, really good coach. And they've superb footballers like Darren McGurn. It's just down for me in all of the games in Division 2. There's a way to get relegated. I know that sounds so stupid, but like, they went down swinging, and they took out Monaghan on the final day. They had some really, really impressive performances, like the one against Roscommon, albeit they came out the wrong side of the result. They were a team that, like, when they get relegated, you're looking at them saying, I think you'll bounce straight back. I really think that Down will get promoted next season if they keep on the trajectory that they're on. Conor Laverty there is an exceptional coach, and I think Down come out the right side of this one.
Yeah, I think so as well. Down will go on and win this game. And Liam, you're saying Down as well?
Yeah, I don't think they'll have it as like straightforward as maybe some people maybe think. That's all. I mean, I think the one thing that kind of points in that direction is Fermanagh haven't won a game in Ulster since 2018 when they got to the final against Donegal. So that side of history is definitely against them. And look, Fermanagh had some good performances in Division 3. They bet us by a point. They pulled off a good result yet against Laois. But yeah, like Seamus said, Down, went down fighting, much like Westmeath. They went down fighting in Division 2. I'd expect them to probably bounce back straight away from Division 3 next year. And yeah, I just think they'll have too much for Fermanagh on the day. And look, they'll set up an interesting battle with either Monaghan or Donegal. But for me, anyways, they'll take care of business this weekend. I think Fermanagh will be it could be a long afternoon for them.
Possibly. So we'll move on to the Con Championship, and the main game there is Galway against Roscommon. This is on Pure Stadium, live on RT2 on Sunday at 4 p.m. Interesting one in terms of this, Liam. The fact that both sides are going into this with rotten form in many ways. Roscommon have won, disregarding obviously the exile games that these two sides had. Galway going to New York, obviously. Roscommon to go into London. Galway lost their last few. Galway, other than the New York game, they haven't won a game since the Donegal game. They have wind in Salt Hill, which is a mad stat in its own right, despite the fact there's so much noise around Galway at this present moment in time. Roscommon's form has been absolutely dreadful, other than the London game. The last 5 games, other than that, they've only won one game, and that was against Cork and Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And you could argue the Cork footballers were affected by the fans on that night in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. So it's an opportunity for both sides maybe to get back up on the horse. Is that a fair way to say this?
Yeah, and even with the way Roscommon performed against London in the first half, I mean, it was 3 points in it by half time, so that certainly wouldn't have gone down too well, I feel, with Davy Burke. Obviously they had too much for them in the end, as you'd expect. And interestingly, I've just seen the Galway starting 15. There's no Shane Walsh this weekend either. So that is not even on the bench. So that is a major, major miss for Galway. Like, when you're talking 2-point kickers as well, like, he's the best in the country, as was proven in the league campaign. He kicks them for fun against Donegal, kicks them for fun against Mayo. So he's going to be a major, major miss for Galway this weekend. But yeah, for me, this is the real Connacht semi-final. I think, you can probably presume that Mayo will beat Leitrim in the other one. But yeah, it kind of similar to Monaghan and Donegal. There's a talk around Galway similar to Donegal. I think Monaghan obviously are in a bit more of a trajectory than Roscommon, but Roscommon were the original top dogs in Division 3 or Division 2, before it all went pear-shaped in the last couple of games, especially starting with that defeat to Meath. And it kind of fell apart from there. But look, Galway took care of business against New York. They'll be fully much more up for this game. It's in Pearse Stadium too, which is a massive bonus for Pádraic Joyce as well. But listen, they still have the likes of Killian McDade there. They still have Matthew Tierney, and they still have Robbie Finnerty there as well. Damien Comer is on the bench. There's no better man to come off the bench to try and salvage a result if needed. So. But yeah, Roscommon for me have looked very shaky at the back in their last couple of games. I've seen it here. They conceded 126 against Monaghan, 119 against Westmeath, 22 at home to Cavan. So I just can't see them having a defence strong enough that can take down Galway, despite the fact that Walsh is out. I still think Galway will have just too much for them. For me, Galway's ambitions this year is to win the All-Ireland. Roscommon's is to maybe, I don't know, get back to a quarter-final, maybe win the Connacht title and get back to a quarter-final, maybe reach a semi-final if they can. Laugh all you want. After half an hour last year, what was it? 1-2 to a point against Armagh after half an hour. Nothing in it at all. Now, it was one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life, but there was nothing in it. So it just proved that Roscommon, in a way, weren't too far off the eventual All-Ireland winners, essentially. But I just think with it being in Pearse Stadium and Galway, especially with Galway's record against Roscommon as well over the last couple of years, and Galway going, what are they going for, 4 in a row in Connacht, or are they going for 3 in a row, or
4 in a row? Yeah,
4 in a row. So I just think they'll have too much for Roscommon in a way. I think we're going to get a repeat of last year's final. But again, if Roscommon were to pull off the win, it'd be massive for Davy Burke as well, especially given how they did end the league campaign. And to get another crack at Mayo in a Connacht final as well, you'd certainly give them every chance of winning that as well, given how Mayo have performed this season. I said it already, despite getting to a league final, they're definitely not the second best team in the country at the moment. So, there's a big opportunity at stake here for both teams, but I just think Galway might just have too much in the tank for them.
There is an argument that Galway are all other contenders, but I'll throw this one to you, Seamus. Shane Walsh being out for this game is a massive blow, obviously, as Liam said. I checked the team sheet just briefly on social media there as well. Damien Comer's coming back into fitness, granted, but you have the likes of Rob Finnerty and Matthew Tierney who are coming back into form. Matthew Tierney scored 2-4 against New York. But would you be concerned about Galway's form at the end of the league? They haven't, other than, as I mentioned before, other than the New York game, they haven't won a game since the Donegal game, where it was absolutely windy that day, especially the first half really, really suited them. Would you be concerned about Galway's form? Is it going in under the radar, do you think?
No, I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Galway fan about their form in the latter stages of the league. It's a similar way that I wouldn't be that worried from a Dublin perspective. We finished the league on a very, very bad day against Tyrone. I wouldn't be that worried. I'd be more worried about Shane Walsh's fitness, because as you were talking, Galway's aim this year has to be to win the All-Ireland. It has to be. And if they want to go all that way, they're going to need Shane Walsh. They're going to need him. And they need to get him back in as soon as possible. As soon as he's fit, as soon as he's able. He needs to be back in training with the full team. I think Joyce was definitely right not to risk him at all against New York. This game, it shows that the injury must be pretty bad if he's not even on the bench for this game. Because, if he had 20 minutes in him, Roscommon are well capable of taking Galway to the brink. And then maybe that's the point where you turn to the bench and go, look, Shane, do you have 15 minutes in you maybe to dig us out of a hole here? Because as we saw in the championship last year against Dublin, Shane Walsh can pretty much play on one leg and still make a massive difference to the game. He was sensational against Dublin when he was clearly compromised. So he's a brilliant footballer. He can make that X factor difference to Galway getting over the line to an All-Ireland. But I still think that without him, they might have too much in the tank for Roscommon. I think Roscommon will give them an almighty test. In the early parts of the league, they looked as good as I've ever seen them. Genuinely, Diarmuid Murtaugh's form was unbelievable. Kieran Murtaugh looked class. Conor Hand, Ben O'Carroll coming back in as well. Enda Smith looked sharp as ever. Brian Stack is a superb fullback. I really, really do believe that they can give Galway an almighty test, but I am going to shade it slightly to the tribesmen here.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Galway as well. It should be a very tight game. It's kind of a shame that it's on at the same time as Liam mentioned with the Cork and Clare game and the Monaghan and Donegal. This is on the same time as Tip and Limerick, which is kind of a shame. But look, that's the GA scheduling there, and there's too many games on top of each other. We'll go through this game very briefly. Leitrim against Mayo in Avoncar, Park Sean McDermott in Leitrim. This is on at 4:30 p.m. on GA Plus on Saturday. Liam, obvious, isn't it? Mayo are going to win this game. As Seamus has said previously, and he mentioned it very, very well about the Stephen Poacher kind of reign as Leitrim manager, it's been a car crash for the word go. And you'd expect Mayo to swat them aside, really.
Yeah, 100%. Leitrim were awful in Division 3. Even though they're in Division 3, I think the argument could be made that they were quite easily the worst side in the country this year by a country mile. And like, I'm not being funny now. This will kind of put into question this weekend why. Now, I'm kind of speaking from a neutral point of view as well, but you'd be thinking, is any big neutrals going to be tuning in for a Leitrim Mayo game this weekend? But then you'd imagine last weekend, you'd have had plenty of neutrals tuning in for Louth and Laois or Offaly and Meath, far more competitive games. Even Wicklow Dublin was a far more competitive game, So I don't know. I think they've made a bit of I think they've dropped the ball a small bit putting this one on GA Plus. Now it's great for Leitrim. They get a bit of exposure, but it's just going to be a drubbing. It just is, like Mayo were not great against Sligo and they got over the line, but Sligo are a much better football team than Leitrim are. So yeah, no, there's no real point kind of going through this in great detail. I think Mayo will quite comfortably win this game, and it'll be a chance for them to practice under 2-pointers as well, because they just simply don't have enough of them on their panel.
That's it, yeah. That's what Mayo have to do in this game. They've no other choice. They're going to win the game anyway. They have to practice new things to try and compete with the bigger opposition. That's what they have to do. It's simple as that. And I think Mayo should win this game comfortably enough. Moving on to the last province of this long, long weekend. There was another comment in here before we get on to the Munster Football Championship. Brian is saying here, Comer's back and fit. Yeah. And we'll see him this weekend, I'm sure. Moving on to the Munster Senior Football Championship semi-final on Saturday at 7 p.m. live on GA Plus. Cork against Kerry in Super Valley Park. I am going to this game as well, so yeah, should be an interesting game, more or less. And I'm not saying that just for the sake of it, Seamus, because the last 2 seasons Cork lost to Kerry by 2 points. Obviously, the David Goff incident with Sean Powter getting the black card and the penalty, obviously. Then they lost by 3 points last year. I was watching that game earlier on today, and I was thinking Cork were cutting Kerry open time and time again, and that was down in Kilkenny. So there's every opportunity Cork can really put it up to Kerry. But I suppose what this rivalry needs is a Cork win just to spark it back into life.
Yeah, it's a kind of similar rhetoric coming into this one than it's been before the Munster Championship in 2020, when it was, a lot of talk about when's the last time the Cork had beaten Kerry, but all you need is that one win to fire the rivalry back up. And it's the same thing over in Leinster with, we need Meath or Kildare or Offaly or Louth or someone to beat Dublin to really spark the Leinster Championship back into life. That's what the Munster Championship needs. The Munster Championship needs somebody to beat Kerry, needs Kerry to have serious challengers going in every season, because you look at how, even, I know it's something so tiny, but like you look at how Paddy Clifford lifted the Munster Cup last year. It was like just down, no emotion. It was like, yeah, we won it again. Whereas you compare that to how the Kerry captains lifted the Munster Cup in the 2000s, in the early 2010s, when they had to go through wars against Cork, and the battles that was between like Noel O'Leary, Mark and Paul Galvin, and Donegal O'Connor, Daniel Goulding at one end versus the Gooch and Kieran Donaghy down the other. Like, those games were absolute epics. And then not even that, you had a fantastic Limerick team under Mickey Ned O'Sullivan that used to push Cork and Kerry all the way. Had players like John Galvin, Michael Reedy, Ian Ryan, and they used to really, really push Kerry and Cork all the way in Munster Championship action. So Kerry used to have to go through at least 1, sometimes 2 extremely difficult games to get their hands on the Munster Cup. And that's why there was great emotion once they won that. And that is why the crowds were a lot better back then for Cork and Kerry games, because they were real 50-50 battles. Kerry, since then, have become the obvious favourite to win Munster every single year. and Cork need to check that to improve the interest in the county's football scene. We've seen it this year with the fans kind of exiting, after the hurling game before the football game is due to start. That's why, it's because they don't feel like there's, something great coming in the pipeline for the Cork footballers. But a win over Kerry would bring a lot of those fans back. So it's a massive opportunity for Cork. I think it's slightly beyond them. I don't think they're going to be able to do it this weekend. But in the same thing with every other year, it will not be a beatdown. It will not be a whitewash. Kerry are not going to blow Cork away. Cork always up their level for Kerry. We've seen it over the last couple of years, and I expect nothing different this weekend.
Yeah, definitely so. And I suppose, in terms of, I don't know, are many people listen to the podcast or watching the podcast aware, but Cork under-20 footballers fell over the line really to get a draw against Tipperary, to get to the Munster final against Kerry, where they lost to Kerry by 10 points in the under-20 a few weeks ago. And even I was discussing the game with Kieran McCarthy in the Star Sport podcast this week in the big match preview to Cork and Kerry. And we both kind of agree, we were kind of agreeing in this as well, that our underage is so lacking in a way. Under-20, we'll see what the minor team is like under Keith Ricken this year from a Cork point of view. But is it almost, from a Cork point of view, you need to beat Kerry once you have a bit of confidence now? Because you look at this Cork team, I know a lot of people who say Kerry are the favourites, a lot of people are backing them, but Cork have kept 3 clean sheets in a row. Their full backline is now set in stone, even though the likes of Sean Brady and Neil Arden are going to their first Munster derby in championship football, which is going to be a baptism of fire for both of them, I'd imagine, as well. And they were very, very controlling in their last 3 games, Cork, in terms of managing the lead against Louth, against Cavan and against Limerick. So would that kind of give the Cork seniors a bit of hope? And do Cork need this win, considering what's around the pipeline and underage in the past few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they need it for John Cleary's future as well. I kind of worried that if he had gone down to Division 3, I'd have worried, would he have survived up until the Munster Championship? I think he needs a massive win, and I don't mean like the one he had over Limerick. He needs a win over he needs a win over a Kerry, and sort of kind of like to spark a bit of life into the Munster Championship as well, because like Seamus said there, Clifford's lifting up the cup the last couple of years. I know obviously a couple of years ago, with the exception of they're losing their mother, was it the day before or whatever, you could understand that. But it just, even last year, the way Paddy lifted the cup, there was no emotion. They were tall, it just felt really dead to them that, okay, we've won it, but we don't care. You compare that to Sweeney lifting it up for Tipperary in 2020. The emotion was, it was there, it meant something to them. And even Kerry beating Cork now in the championship, it just doesn't mean as much to them, whereas for Cork to beat Kerry, you saw it in 2020. I know they didn't go on to win the final, but just to even beat them and to throw the whole championship open was incredible. And, to do it in the fashion they did it as well. So, yeah, no, I think Cork need to, if they can get the ball to the likes of Chris Oak-Jones and to Brian we know what Brian Hurley can do. Brian O'Driscoll kicked a couple of 2-pointers against Limerick. If you can get them on the ball, and if you can get them shooting for 2-pointers as well, especially 2-pointers could be a crucial point in this game as well, because Kerry haven't really used the 2-pointer rule to their advantage in the league either as well. They do have the players to do it, I think, more so than Mayo, but they haven't executed that properly yet. So it will be an interesting game, especially in Páirc Uí Chaoimh as well. It'll be a wide open pitch, so it'll be interesting to see how Cork use that to their advantage, if at all. So yeah, no, I still think Kerry will come out on top of this game. Like you said, that they're All Ireland. I back them to win the All Ireland this year. So I think this is the first stop. This is the first stop for them, and I think they'll have too much for, realistically, Clare in the Munster final.
Yeah, well, I think Kerry will go on and win the game as well. But I still think there's avenues for Cork to cause a shock, especially, as Liam rightly mentioned there, to 2-pointers. Cork have got 15 2-pointers in their last 3 games. Kerry have got none. So that might be an avenue to victory for Cork. And I think they need to shot this Kerry team. They need to bring the fire, bring thunder. And hopefully that will bring Cork over the line. Brian has a comment in here. Cork have a free hit and have nothing to lose. Matthew, what's your expectations for the Cork footballers? To produce a big win this year anyway. Like, we produced a big win against Mayo and Roscommon and Donegal last year. The team are capable of doing it. And hopefully it'll be this weekend against Kerry. We'll have to see this weekend. But I genuinely think there is improvement in the Cork footballers this year at senior level. Underage, there's a problem, but that's a discussion for another day, obviously. And moving on to the last game, obviously, in the other side of the Munster draw, Clare against Tipperary in, I'll mention the name again, Zimmer Biomet Park Kisog on Saturday at 2 p.m. It's amazing I've mentioned that name twice in one podcast, but there you go. Seamus, this is a big game for both sides, putting laughing aside, because the winner of this will get Sam Maguire football despite their placings in the league.
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity for both of these teams. I mean, crazy to think that like it's that easy for some teams to get into the Sam Maguire. It's a very interesting kind of layout to the structure and everything like that, but it's a golden opportunity for both Clare and Tipperary. Who do I think will come out the right side of it? I think if you're looking at both of their league campaigns, there's a lot of big players that have returned to the Tip panel over the last years. The likes of Mark Russell, Shawnee O'Connor. Having those lads back is massive.
Stephen O'Brien was brilliant in the last game as well.
Stephen O'Brien as well, since his kind of relocation from midfield to full forward has been unbelievable there. But I think Clare will probably still be too strong for them, because when you're talking about players that have returned into the panel, Owen Cleary, Keelan Sexton, those lads returning to the Clare team, you can't buy that experience, you can't buy that class to come in for Clare. And added on top of the likes of Emma McMahon, Ike Maguire, I think they're just superb in their respective positions. I think Clare will have too much for Tip and will book their place in the Munster final, and by virtue then the Sam Maguire.
Yep, I think Clare will win there. And Liam emphasised earlier that Clare will probably play Kerry in the Munster final as well. So we're all saying Clare will win this game, but Tip to put up a bigger test than they have in previous seasons, no doubt about that. So we have reached the end of the podcast, lads. In 1 hour, 41 minutes, 13 seconds. What a marathon of action we got through there. But obviously, we've come to the end of the podcast now, lads. Thanks to anybody that commented on the video, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks to Capture Athletics for sponsoring today's show. Thanks to Liam. Thanks to Seamus for coming on today to tonight's show to discuss the games at the weekend. And until next week, we'll see you then. Enjoy the games of the weekend and take care.